You immerse yourself in biology or whatever the subject is. They go, well, no one else does that. I go, no shit. That's why I'm the best. Okay. You do these little additional things that make you better. You have the psychology. You're going to become the best. And what happens when you do that is you get all this energy. So I was so happy. I don't just have to obsess about not being the wrestler I wanted to be. Now I have a chance to become a great doctor or scientist that it gave me all this energy. That's how I won the Stanford Student Athlete of the Year award, first in my medical school class. Well, I think a lot of people have higher IQ than I do, but they didn't have my intense focus and energy. It enables me to just work and not to be distracted.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Sen, and I'm delighted to have Dr. Peter Rogers today with me. He is a Stanford and Harvard educated MD who for over 30 years has helped people optimize their performance in school, sports, and health. He is also an imaging guided surgeon and neuroradiologist, and he's written multiple nutrition, medical, and study skills books and lectures on his YouTube channel. Now, I became interested in Dr. Rogers' work because he has a particularly unique background in biochemistry, toxicology, and brain health. And most plant-based doctors we know are interested in the heart because heart disease is the #1 killer of Americans. However, Dr. Rogers hones in on many things which affect the brain. And thus, he has many new marvelous insights which he shares with us. And he has completely reshaped my understanding of what's healthy, as well as many of my friends. We've all just been continually blown away by all the AOs, the academic orgasms that he throws out at us. So in today's Q&A, I've gathered questions from myself, but also mainly from my audience members. And we'll primarily go over questions about how to avoid toxins and how to optimize our diets. So let's get started. The first question that someone had, this is from Andy Baines, who's actually a nutritionist and the one who introduced me to you. He asks if only cotton clothing is safe. In particular, he's into exercise, and a lot of exercise clothing has synthetic fibers, polyester. Is that clothing safe to wear, or should we only wear cotton clothing or other natural fibers?
Well, in general, I tend to prefer cotton. You can get like some of the polyethylene ones will have, potentially like polyethylene terephthalate, which is phthalates, the estrogen chemicals. The synthetic ones are more likely to itch. The non-wrinkle stuff might have formaldehyde in it, which you don't want. That's kind of toxic. Also, I think the key thing with clothing is how you take care of it. And what I mean by that is I don't use any laundry detergent. I had a lady friend who was from Korea. She said they just boiled their laundry. I just run my laundry on, a little bit longer on the cycle time, maybe a little hotter, and then I run the dryer a little longer, maybe than I have to. I don't want to put detergents because if you think about it, you have a plastic bottle, right? Plastic bottle is typically made out of BPA or a BPA equivalent. Then the plastic is conditioned with a phthalate. So that's 2 estrogens. Then the detergent itself is quite often something like nonylphenol, which is another estrogen. So you got 3 estrogens you're pouring onto your clothes. And the little anti-wrinkle squares you throw in the dryer, those are estrogen too. So that's 4 estrogens. Then what happens is your clothing is touching your skin all day long. The relevance being, like, let's say you drink milk. Milk, the cows are now pregnant when they make the milk, so it has very high estrogens, but at least your liver clears about 50% of that. It's called first pass effect for detoxification. The food goes from your gut through the portal vein right to the liver, and it gets partially detoxified. What I'm saying is, with your clothing touches your skin all day, and it doesn't go through the liver. Everything goes right into your skin. In chemistry, like dissolves like. Estrogen is a lipid chemical, lipophilic chemical, so it's a fat. Your skin, think about it, if you dive into the water, you don't immediately gain 5-10 pounds. You're not transdermally absorbing the water because your skin's designed to keep water out, but it is not designed to keep fat out. That's why you can take hormone dosages, testosterone, estrogen, et cetera, with these transdermal creams. They're transdermally absorbed. And the point I'm saying is you also absorb estrogens from your clothing. So if you got 4 estrogens from your detergent and your laundry squares, and that's touching your skin all day, you're accumulating a lot of estrogen. The estrogen levels in the human body are relatively low, about 20 picograms per milliliter in a man, and a woman is 20 to 400, depending on where she's in her cycle. So what I'm saying is you can get these levels in the thousands with these synthetic estrogens, and that can potentially be damaging to your health. It'll increase a woman's risk of breast cancer, a man's risk of prostate cancer. It could contribute to lowering a man's testosterone. They're sort of like men have lower testosterone than they used to. There's a tremendous wave of increasing infertility, and there's numerous things contributing to that. So I think the smart move is try to reduce all of those risks. And this is one way to do it.
Thank you. And most people, when they hear to not use laundry detergent or not use soaps, the instant thought is, but what if that makes me smell? What if people complain about it? Have you, following this lifestyle, ever gotten complaints?
No, and I can also tell you, I've had a million conversations in my life about women, okay? Never once has that been the problem. The thing that makes women unattractive to men is they think she's fat, okay? And I think there's a reason, because psychologically, we can't even help it, okay? We're programmed to try to reproduce. And you look at a woman, and basically, if her waist is more narrow than her butt, you think she's probably fertile, because it's dangerous to approach a woman romantically. She could, get her boyfriend, her husband, her brother, her father to beat you up. And so I think what the brain says to a man is, if she's definitely infertile, because to be fat in the past meant you were pregnant. So I think the way that works is, if a man sees a woman who's fat, what his brain says to him subconsciously is like, you have zero chance of having a baby with that lady. Why risk getting beat up? Forget it. She's not attractive. And it's like they can't even help that. So I think that's that issue.
Gotcha. So good to know you have it.
Oh, you talked about smell. I kind of got sidetracked there.
Oh, no, no worries.
Yeah, so the point being is, no, because when people walk around and say, hey, how you doing? They don't go, smell your armpit. Okay, come on. That's just conformist nonsense. It's advertising. These deodorants didn't used to exist. Come on.
Gotcha.
People used to shower once a year. There were even less.
Yeah. I mean, this maybe sounds quite crude, but I've heard how in places where there isn't showering or more like tribal areas, for example, women, when they menstruate, the blood is on there and it just dries on their legs and they don't shower it off, and it's fine. It's how it worked before we had feminine sanitary products. So another audience member, Kurt, who, by the way, has taken a lot of recommendations. He has a whole house carbon filter. He does all these things. He was wondering, is electromagnetic radiation from in-house Wi-Fi use safe, or things like 5G towers? And he particularly has high blood pressure and is wondering whether EMFs can contribute to that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how significant it is. I doubt that it does anything good. If you have a choice, like let's say you have a choice and you can control everything, you live by yourself or whatever, I would think it'd be better to have hardwired cable internet. And you could even just turn it off at night. You don't want that in your bedroom right where you sleep. I don't think anything good comes from the Wi-Fi, and I think these newer high frequency types are going to have negative effects, but I don't know the severity of that.
Gotcha. Many mainstream plant doctors, they've gotten it wrong about soy and flax. Is there anything else major that you think they've gone wrong? I know that, for example, on fat, they're more liberal on fat than you. Besides that, anything else?
Well, there's a couple things. I think it's an entire philosophy. And what I mean by that is, people will look back on a doctor, let's say from the 1700s and the early 1800s, and said, oh, those guys, they don't know what they're doing. They just do phlebotomy for everything. How ridiculous is that? And what I'm trying to say is, it's good to study history, because patterns repeat themselves. We are in a pattern where everybody thinks you just match the ill to the pill and you send the bill, and that's what medicine's all about. But the reality is, most drugs don't work, okay? And the cure rate is 0%. Why would you choose something with a 0% rate of cure when you could have a 100% rate of cure? And let me give some examples. Okay, let's talk about coronary artery disease. Dr. Esselstyn's diet, low fat, low sodium, was a specifically low-fat vegan diet, okay, with no oil. The cure rate for atherosclerosis is 100%. July 2014, Journal of Family Practice, okay, 198 patients, every single one that followed the diet, no recurrent coronary events. So what I'm saying is, there's a 100% cure, versus if you get a stent or an open heart surgery, coronary artery bypass graft, you can bypass, the most severe stenosis, and that might give you a reduction in your symptomatic chest pain, but that doesn't change the diffuse atherosclerosis plugging up every little branch of those coronaries, meaning that it doesn't change your risk of a heart attack, of a myocardial infarction, of death. Okay, so it can cost $100,000 to $150,000 for open heart surgery, and you had essentially a 0% change in your death rate, and you could die, in the early post-operative course from all kinds of complications, a stroke, you could be cognitively impaired, all kinds of problems. So what I'm saying is, once you study nutrition, you'll realize that the vast majority of diseases, at least 70%, are due to diet and toxicology. So why not avoid those things? Look at high blood pressure. Dr. Kempner routinely took patients with systolics around 230, and he got them back down to normal with a rice diet, a low-fat rice diet, low-sodium rice diet. So it's remarkable. What's the incidence of cure for diabetes? Roy Taylor's paper, 4 years of type 2 diabetes, you put them on a low-fat vegan diet, it's almost 100%. They all get better. So why not be cured? I mean, what's not to like about that?
Absolutely. So Are you of the opinion that the majority of plant-based doctors are perhaps not pushing enough how strict one needs to be on their diet to achieve optimal results?
Well, I think it varies from individual how much you need to do to get better. But my attitude is why not just do everything you can to get better? And then you're, in a sense, to me, it gives you freedom because a lot of people, they go into old age afraid, am I going to have a heart attack, at diabetes, have all these problems of stroke, become demented? And basically, if you eat the, whole food, low fat, low sodium vegan diet with no oil, an organic only, your risk of these diseases is incredibly low. So also, it becomes ridiculous to screen. For example, I don't screen for prostate cancer. My risk is so low. If you screen when the risk is really low, then your risk of a false positive is much higher. And that's a problem because you can get overtreated for a false positive. And you don't want that. There can be a lot of side effects from that. I very much appreciate the freedom I get from having the ability to lower my risk so much that I can just forget about all that stuff. I don't go to a doctor. I don't do anything. I'm 59. I'm totally healthy. I'm strong. I'm fit. I'm smart. I can concentrate 12 hours in a row. That's what I want. I can lift weights, and I've seen that sort of thing. For example, look at some of these patients. There's a lady by the name of Saray Stancic who had multiple sclerosis. Okay. She's on like 10 different pills. She's walking with a walker. She's about in her mid 30s. And then she read about, Dr. Swank's research on putting patients on a low fat diet, and she's cured. She doesn't take any medicine. It's 25 years later. She's still working. Okay. She's been able to enjoy her life. All right. And there's other people like that. Ruth Heidrich, metastatic cancer. Janet Marie Wakelin, metastatic breast cancer, both of them. They're running marathons. Saray Stancic ran a marathon. So what I'm trying to say is I have heard of, Lance Armstrong. He had testicular cancer, and that was treated with chemotherapy, and he went on to win the Tour de France. That was incredible. Testicular cancer is relatively unique amongst cancers. It responds really well to chemo. The chemo is able to cure the stem cells. That's not always the case with a lot of cancers. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is in the plant world, that's pretty routine. Go low fat vegan, run a marathon, okay? Which is a heck of a lot better than, suffer, crash, burn, and die, which is what happens to most of these other patients, okay? So it's an amazing thing.
Truly remarkable. I think Saray, she has a documentary called Code Blue, which I've watched. Really good, just showing her whole progression and showing how MS can be overcome. Someone was also wondering, do you use an air purifier all day personally? And do you recommend that everyone use one, even if they don't live near a city with lots of pollutants?
Well, one of my family members has one, so I guess we all benefit from having one in the house. Whether or not you need it, I don't know for sure, but it's probably a good thing. But, I actually do think, though, you're kind of bringing up a point that most people, everybody's afraid of spiders and afraid of snakes. Okay, that's kind of innate in us, but most people are not afraid of chemicals, and they should be. Okay, what I mean by that is I see people all the time working with chemicals. They don't open their door. They don't ventilate the room. You can accumulate toxic exposures over time if your habits are that way. A lot of these cleaning chemicals are relatively toxic. And if every day you're using them and you're not opening the door, you could be exposed to some pretty toxic stuff.
Absolutely. And speaking of toxic things, we know that sunscreen is filled with a lot of estrogenizing chemicals and things that are harmful to us. If someone, say me, living in New Zealand now, where the UV is extremely strong due to damage to our ozone layer, if I want to be outdoors during midday because I have to be, does the benefit of wearing a zinc oxide-based sunscreen outweigh the harms?
I kind of think sunscreen's a bit of a joke because, like you're saying, there's a lot of things in there, oxybenzone and whatnot, all the chemical sunscreens in particular, where you're absorbing all these estrogenic chemicals. And sometimes they're mixing them with nanoparticles, and nobody knows the clinical significance of that. There is reason to be concerned about it. And they do stay in your blood for days. There's a patient, I gave a video lecture on this subject of sunscreens. Chemical blockers like these oxybenzones and whatnot, they'll stay in your blood for days and days. So you're getting all this estrogenic exposure. I think the best one is the zinc oxide with no nanoparticles. Other things I used to do is wear a sombrero or a long sleeve shirt if I had to do something outside longer than I wanted. I just get my sun. I go outside in the sun with no sunscreen for about a half hour, and I just, stand out in the sun reading a book, and my vitamin D's are fine. I don't ever take vitamin D pill, and that's worked well for me. So as far as sunscreens, I would say if you absolutely have to do it, let's say you got a job, you got to work outside, wear a hat and long sleeve shirts if you can. But if it's too hot, if you have to use a sunscreen, I'd probably go, like I said, with that zinc oxide no nanoparticles.
And how much water do you drink throughout the day? You've mentioned in your video lectures how it's kind of a scam, the whole 8 glasses a day. Beverage companies are pushing that on us. Do you drink any glasses outside of when you eat?
I don't worry about it. And the reason I say that is, the winner of the marathon, they in the around 1970 and before, they didn't drink any water. They'd run 26 miles without drinking any water. Okay. And I was a wrestler in college. We'd routinely sweat off about 5 or 10 pounds each practice. We didn't drink any water. We were fine. Your body's able to regulate and adjust pretty well in that range of water loss. Okay. It's nice to be hydrated. I think if I'm about to try to get my personal rep maximum lifting weights, I'll try to hydrate, a couple hours in advance. So there's a benefit to it. But what I'm trying to say is what I see is nobody even sold bottled water until, I don't know, it was about late 1980s. It started to become known, early 1990s. And that happened when they started selling bottled water and when they started selling Gatorade. All of a sudden, there's all these commercials and it's in all these like newspapers. You need to get your 8 cups a day. You need your 8 cups a day. So I think, since the beginning of time, we've been guided by our thirst, and that's good enough. I can also tell you there are some doctors who I respect who think it's a good idea to try to be hydrated through the day, but you run into what I call the water paradox. The more you filter water and take all the bad stuff out, you then run the risk of becoming hypoosmolar. People have had what's called water intoxication, like these marathon runners. They would get a drink of water every 500 yards, and they became water intoxicated. You're supposed to have a blood sodium, like let's say in the ballpark around 135, and you can drop that too low, 105, 135, 140. You drop that too low, you can have a seizure. Okay, it's a little bit dangerous. And so what I'm saying is, if you want to take all the bad stuff out of the water, like reverse osmosis filtered, now your particle level is very small. You get something, it looks like a pen. It's called a TDS meter, total dissolved solids. And in tap water, you're talking about 500 TDS, particles per milliliter, square centimeter. But when you carbon filter it, you're dropping that to about 200. When you reverse osmosis filter it, you're dropping that to about 10 to 110. If you distill it, you're dropping it about 0 to 2. Now, I know there's some people who talk about drinking distilled water. And I think, maybe they even did it at True North. And so they might know something about it. I don't know. I read a book by a guy named Yeo Mamas, who was this, PhD biochemist, and he felt that was the best thing to drink. My own thought, though, is I'm a little scared of that because it's hypoosmolar. If I eat first, I can increase the particle content in it. If you squeeze a lemon into it, you can increase the particle content in there and, protect from hypoosmolality. So I'm not sure about that. But is there maybe a benefit to being more hydrated? There might be, but like again, you're running this catch. If you're walking around with bottled water, that bottled water is typically in a type of plastic called PET, polyethylene terephthalate. Phthalate. You're drinking estrogen. Estrogen predisposes you to be fat. I can tell you it's a very stereotypical thing. You see a fat lady walking around drinking bottled water saying, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm drinking more bottled water. And she's drinking estrogen that's probably making it harder for her to lose weight. So
your talk about estrogens and everything has been pretty revolutionary to me because beforehand I never had heard about this being everywhere. Thank you for shedding so much light upon that. Knowledge workers, we are often, at our desks on the computers all day long. How do you keep yourself from being sedentary all day?
I try to stand up and walk around, every 15 minutes or so if I can. I'll even just walk in a little circle, whatever room I'm in. You just got to keep moving. I'll move my arms too. The reason is when you move your muscles, they're designed to do that. You pump your lymphatics. Our veins are connected to our cardiovascular circulation. Plus, they also work off the muscles in our legs, for example. Our leg muscles contract. They've got a valve system, returns the blood to the heart. But all throughout your body, parallel to your veins for the blood, you've got lymphatic vessels. And your white blood cells travel all over the body trying to remove infections, trying to remove foreign bodies that don't belong there, trying to remove cancer. And by the way, I think everybody has some cancer cells in their body, and our immune system is great at clearing it out. But you have, giving it exercise really helps it a lot. And for example, that's one thing I've noticed a lot, because I studied all these survivors of metastatic cancer, and I can tell you that is a routine thing that they exercised a lot. And I've read all these people, metastatic cancer, you know what they tell the patient? You're dead in a couple of months, make a will. There's nothing anybody can do for you, okay? And these people are out running marathons, okay, after the diagnosis of metastatic cancer, and they're alive 20, 30 years later, okay? So it helps. In addition, what happens is you have something called the AMPK pathway. It's like adenosine monophosphate, as in like adenosine triphosphate and energy in the cell. And what it signals is, so it's actually called the AMP pathway in terms of adenosine monophosphate, activated protein kinase pathway, AMPK. The relevance is it's the opposite of mTOR. It's when you have high AMP in your cell, it senses that and it says, hey, energy storage is low. Now is not a good time to grow. Therefore, we must shut off mTOR. mTOR is mammalian targeted rapamycin, which tells a cell, or mechanistic targeted rapamycin, it tells the cell, now's a good time to grow and replicate. So what's my point? My point is accelerated cell replication. That's how cancer grows and kills you. But AMPK, when the body's a little tired, it says, hey, energy's low, no cell division today. So you stop your cancer from growing. It's a wonderful thing. And those are two major reasons why exercise tremendously can slow down cancer growth. Like I said, it gets your lymphatics to work better, and it turns off mTOR, the pathway that speeds cancer growth. And as a matter of fact, too, here's another little secret. Turning off mTOR in a non-cancer person, most of us, is that it slows down the rate of cell replication. We have something called a Hayflick limit, meaning that you only get about 60 cell divisions in your typical cell in your body. You know, the stem cells are different, the gonadal germ cells are different, but the vast majority of cells in your body are what is called somatic cells. They only can divide about 60 times. Hayflick was a microbiologist who worked with human tissue cultures and made that observation. So what's my point? When you slow down the activation of mTOR by reducing your intake of animal protein and by exercising more, you slow down the rate at which you age. So you look younger for your age. And you look at vegans. Vegans look younger. They look better.
They definitely do. You're almost 60. You definitely do not look your age.
I can go lift weights right now and do squats and I'm fine.
That's great. And for exercise, a lot of these vegan people, we see them doing extreme endurance events and excelling in them. And we know the importance of improving blood flow in order to reduce ischemia and just ensure that our cells don't get hypoxic and then becomes cancer cells. Does strength training also confer longevity benefits, or should we be prioritizing cardio activity?
Well, I think aerobic exercise is more important, but strength is good. You know, you want to maintain some physical strength that helps protect you. You fall down, you catch yourself, you're stronger, you can just do more things. And the body, to some extent, is a use it or lose it system. If you don't do some physical work, you'll start to lose that ability to do it. Because, you know, every day your mitochondria, your cell decides, do we need to make more mitochondria? Can we make fewer mitochondria? Our body is designed to survive times of starvation and deprivation. So it doesn't want to waste resources. And if you're not routinely exercising, it'll get weaker.
You advise to not take more than 10% of calories from protein. Would you say that for people trying to enhance muscularity and bulk, especially younger guys, that is detrimental to their longevity?
Yeah, I think they have to be careful about that. I've seen a lot of young guys put themselves into kidney failure because what'll happen is there'll be some guy on the internet. He'll be this big bodybuilder who's taking anabolic steroids. He's big because he's taking anabolic steroids. They speed recovery and the guy can lift a lot heavier and a lot more often. But here's the problem, okay? This guy who's gotten big from taking these dangerous anabolic steroids that are probably going to end his life prematurely, he tells these young guys, and here's the protein supplement that I take, and I take creatine. So the young guy's like, oh, I got to get that protein supplement. So they buy the protein supplement. Basically, there's three types of macronutrients. There's carbohydrates with no nitrogen, there's fat with no nitrogen, and then there's protein. Protein's got all the nitrogen. And the main job of the kidney is to excrete the nitrogen. You kind of are overwhelming your kidneys with all that nitrogen. They go into what's called hyperfiltration, but it's worse than that. In addition, a lot of them are contaminated by heavy metals. There's a good paper on that, Consumer Reports. I think it's 2008 and, you know, follow up in 2012. And the point being is a lot of these heavy metals, they're nephrotoxic, toxic to the kidneys. So you run the risk of damage to your kidneys. And I don't think creatine is safe. I know all the sites that sell it will tell you it's safe. I actually bought a book summarizing all the research studies, and I would read in the conclusion, no proven incidents of causing kidney failure, no proven incidents of causing cancer. Okay. But when you look at the body of the report, you'll go, these, give you the metabolites, things that are associated with damaging the kidney. So I wouldn't trust it. It's like, why take a chance with it? You'll be strong enough if you just lift weights, get your sleep, and don't do stupid stuff with your testosterone. What I mean by that is I'll see these guys are in the gym lifting weights and they got their cell phone in the front pocket. Geniuses. It's a low power microwave transmitter. They're microwaving their balls all day. Okay. And then they sit with their laptop on their lap, microwaving their balls from the Wi-Fi in there. I go, hey, genius, why are you doing that? That's counterproductive, don't you think? So avoiding those types of habits will help them to not be lower in their estrogen. And also, I think the best chance you have to win the game, if you will, is to be a minimalist. I say live like Adam and Eve, but with indoor heating and plumbing. And by that, I mean, don't be rubbing all this stuff on yourself. Like we just talked about, the more chemicals you expose yourself, most cosmetic products, cleaning chemicals, they're all estrogenic because estrogen is like the greatest preservative. Not estrogen itself, the female hormone, but estrogen-like compounds that have a benzene ring on them with a hydroxyl group. That's called the phenol group, because the benzene ring confers stability. There's 3 double bonds that resonate amongst the 6 carbons, so it's like a cyclohexane, and that has high stability. Stay on the shelf for 4 years, it doesn't spoil. So the companies want that. And then the hydroxyl group, the phenol, it's antimicrobial. So that combination of good shelf life stability, antimicrobial, so no mold grows in their product, it doesn't get sent back to them, it can sit on the shelf for 4 years and still be sold. They're all going to have that. That's never going to change. So the only way you can avoid all that stuff is be a minimalist. And it's easy to become a minimalist when you start thinking about it. For example, I don't use dishwasher soap because if you don't cook with oil, then you don't really need a dishwasher. You just rinse stuff off. There might be some occasional exceptions, but usually you don't. Okay, I make rice in a pressure cooker, rinse it off, done. Okay, it's easy. Same thing, for potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans. I don't need laundry detergent. I don't need dishwasher detergent. I told you I don't use laundry detergent. The only thing I have in my bathroom is a simple transparent bar of the simplest soap that there is. My wife was a cosmetologist before she became a doctor. In her bathroom, 55 cosmetic products. Okay. I said, what are you doing? That's crazy. You don't even know what you're putting on yourself. She's like, you don't understand. I go, what do you mean I don't understand? She goes, a woman would rub shit on herself and she thought it would make her look pretty. I go, well, that's what you're doing. That's ridiculous. Okay. So she goes, well, she said to me, she goes, you're just jealous because you have wrinkles. She said, look right there at your forehead. You have a big bitch line, a real big bitch line right there. And I said, okay, sweetheart, fine. Okay. So I don't think it's a good strategy, all these cosmetic products.
Oh my gosh, I agree. I've only worn makeup twice in my life, which is once to my junior high school prom, once to my senior high school prom. Otherwise, I don't wear makeup. And like you, the only product I have is this one bar of really simple Castile soap, which I use to wash my hair, wash my face, just everything. I'm also about minimalism and not having to overcomplicate my life with products.
Yeah, because here's another secret about low-fat vegan diet. Basically, plants have everything you want to improve blood flow. Plants intrinsically are high in potassium, and they're high in magnesium. Magnesium is right in the center of the chlorophyll molecule. If somebody types that in their browser, chemical structure of chlorophyll, they'll see magnesium in the center, okay? And there's just a lot of P for plants, P for potassium. Those are both vasodilators. They open up your arteries. The opposite is sodium. Sodium inhibits endothelial nitric oxide. It vasoconstricts your arteries, tightens them all up. So, and there's typically a lot of sodium in processed food and when people eat a meat-based diet. So what am I saying? Vegans have better blood flow to their skin. That gives them a glow of vitality. Plus, they're shutting down mTOR because they're not eating all that animal protein with all that leucine, and that makes them look more youthful. It makes them look more attractive. So you get these benefits just from the plant-based diet.
Yeah, you have it on point. And on the subject of sodium, fermented foods, I know you've done a video showing how studies show fermented foods lead to increased rates of stomach cancer and other things. But that's for food fermented with high amounts of salt. Do you know whether food that's fermented that's salt-free would still be harmful in that respect?
I don't know. I don't know that much about fermented food. It was just sort of the sodium association.
Gotcha. And then kind of a new rage, trendy thing to do right now is for people to take cold plunges, like cold exposure. What are your thoughts on those? I'm curious because I know you're all about improving blood flow and staying warm.
Yeah, I'm not that big a fan of that idea. And it reminds me, there's like this Wim Hof guy who sits in cold water. My experience is it taps into a human mentality where people want a quick fix. Okay, I can do all kinds of stupid stuff, but as long as I take a quick shower for 5 minutes, I'm going to be okay. And what I would say is just do everything that you should do. And I have no interest in jumping in a cold shower. It's not very pleasant. I think it gives a shock to the system, and that's going to crank up your stress hormones. I don't really see a need to do that. So I don't have much experience with it. So I'm certainly not well experienced with it. I've tried it once or twice before and I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. I didn't like it. I didn't get anything out of it. So I don't personally do it. And the rationale, all I can say is you're going to give a shock to your system, zoom up your sympathetic hormones. And, do you really want to do that? I've heard, maybe if you're about to lift personal best and you're weightlifting, that might be one more thing to pump you up a little bit before you go for a personal best. But I don't know if that's really a good idea, if that effect's going to carry over by the time you get to the weight room from taking a shower and you actually get to the weight room and are warmed up and set in front of the mat. You have to warm up to be strong to lift a heavy weight. You got to warm up anyway. So you're kind of moving in quite a dramatically different direction by the time you step onto the bar for your 1 rep maximum.
Yeah, and as you say, we should live like Adam and Eve, except with indoor plumbing and heating, and they probably were not throwing themselves in glacial lakes all the time.
Yeah,
The next question, this is again from Andy Baines, the nutritionist. He's wondering, does intake of plant diversity matter in your diet? He says that, for example, studies show more microbial diversity is correlated with better health. Is that just a marker for plant intake in general?
Yeah, the way I see that is there's sort of a debate. On the one hand, there's a guy named William Bolshevitz. He's relatively young guy, around 40, early 40s. He's a gastroenterologist. He wrote that book, Fiber Fueled, which is a very good book. And there was a research, I don't know, the researcher's name might be Knight, something like that. And they sort of are proponents of this, eat the rainbow, eat the wider variety, the better of plant foods. But I can just tell you, I'm a little bit more old school, a little more the Dr. McDougall school. What McDougall says is, all these blues owner type people, they don't run around trying to eat the highest different number of plants every day. They just eat the common ones they eat every day and they're fine. That you don't need that much variety. And they also say if you keep on seeking variety every day, you're going to have a tendency to overeat and be more likely to get fat. So, I think it's probably reasonable if you want to try something different this week, have a little variety. Yeah, that's fine. But I don't think you have to drive yourself crazy seeking for that many different things, because lots of these other populations, they ate what they could to get by. There's a surprisingly good amount of, you could eat only potatoes, put somebody in a metabolic ward for 6 months and they'll be fine. I think, sure, it's reasonable to eat a little bit of variety when you can, but I don't think it's that big a deal to seek it from what I can tell. I think there's basically 2 types of gut flora. One type of gut flora comes from eating plant foods because you got all the fiber. That's what feeds the good bacteria. And we've co-evolved with them for many, many thousands, however many years it is. And those bacteria, based on feeding on our fiber, they want us to be healthy because our colon is a good apartment for them, okay? And they're symbiotic with us. They do a few nutritional things that benefit us, and they help convert the fiber into short-chain fatty acids. That's why I call fiber the only good fat. And basically the butyric acid, butyrate, 4 carbons, that's used by our colon to make tight junctions, if you will. And then the acetate and propionate, acetate 2 carbons, propionate 3 carbons, that goes through the portal vein to the liver and it can make whatever fats it wants out of that. So that's what I'm saying is what's good. The other type of gut microbiome comes from eating meat and from processed food because of the lack of fiber. And those bacteria have not co-evolved with us. They're not symbiotic with us. They don't care if we live or die. And so they do a lot of things you don't want. And those are the 2 main types of gut. Yeah, if you eat a wider variety of plants, there'll probably be a little bit wider variety of good bacteria, but you get what you want. I mean, these are people that are living to 105, these Okinawans. I've seen them doing push-ups and, looking really good in their hundreds. And they're not going to a doctor. They die in their sleep of old age, and that's kind of like the optimal way to go, to be healthy up until the end, and then you just die. Eventually, the heart kind of runs out.
Gotcha. I know a few people who have pretty severe asthma that they've had since childhood. Are there particular things you'd recommend for someone to do to overcome asthma?
Yeah, this might help. There's different types of asthma. One of them is salt sensitivity is under-recognized as a cause of asthma. I'll tell you a quick story about my brother. We were wrestlers when we were young. Okay, my brother's a tough, good wrestler. He was state champion. Illinois, it's a tough state, one of the best states in the United States for wrestling. State champion freestyle and Greco-Roman. Okay, so he's going to college. Everybody figures he's going to be an All-American for sure. He never placed in the Nationals. He was not an All-American. And it was a disappointment. And nobody knew why, but he would just run out of energy. The guys, like, say, from Iowa were dominant national champs many years. They would just wear people out. And then once the other guy was tired, they would score points and win the match. And the reason I'm telling you all this is my brother kept doing these fitness things like mixed martial arts and stuff. And about when he's about in his 40s, like early 40s, he became a vegetarian. He's not 100% vegetarian, but he went in that direction and his endurance came back. And he's like a 3-time world champion now. All right. So what I'm saying is high sodium intakes, it makes the immune system a little bit hyperreactive in a bad way, and it increases the risk of asthma. There's other things. A person can have other types of food allergies, and air pollution can make it worse. I'm not an expert on asthma, but for what it's worth, that's some pretty easy things to do.
And what about long COVID? I also know a few people struggling with that. Do you have any recommendations for getting over that?
I'm not an expert on that, but I'll just sort of tell you how I see health in general. And this will almost seem silly, but it's true. Remember, like the video games, Super Mario Brothers, or any of these other video games, you're the character running through the environment, and then there's the good things you do, and you get the little green energy points to make you stronger. And then there's when you screw up and you have energy points taken away from you. So what I'm trying to say is your body has a baseline resilience that enables you to heal from disease and optimizes your immune function. We talked about how a lot of exercise gets your immune lymphatic fluid to flow a lot faster, your white blood cells surveil the body, remove germs, remove cancer cells, remove other things that need to be removed. They optimize your immune system's function. Getting your sleep optimizes immune function. You lower your cortisol level, the stress hormone. So what I'm saying is avoid all the things that weaken your ability to heal. For example, no coffee, no tea, no caffeine. Caffeine mimics acute stress response. What does that do? It raises cortisol and it raises catecholamines, adrenaline and noradrenaline. They both are immunosuppressants, okay? So you don't want to be stressed out. Also, when you don't sleep, your cortisol is higher. It's an immunosuppressant, okay? Corticosteroid medicines, that's an immunosuppressant. So you want to avoid all those things by getting your sleep. And you also want to reduce your stress. And it's good to have a philosophy of the world. What I think happens to a lot of people is they have a little bit of a spoiled childhood and they have this over-optimistic view of the world. And they're constantly disappointment and they're kind of sad and stressed versus I would say I kind of have a pessimistic view of the world in a sense. And that paradoxically, that makes me happy. Because I expect problems, I'm not surprised with them and I'm ready for them. I like the quote by Marcus Aurelius. He said, a man should be like a cliff that faces the ocean, and all day long the waves crash against the bottom of the cliff, but the cliff is not moved. And so what I mean by that is lots of annoying little tedious things happen all day. I don't take them personally. Like if somebody is rude to me when I'm, when I was like 20-year-old guy, I'm like, oh, that person was so rude. That's really obnoxious. Why could they behave like that? No, I just say to myself, that person is just a low-class idiot. It doesn't affect me. I'll just be polite to them and I won't talk to them. I'll try to avoid them in the future if I should ever encounter them again. But what I'm saying is I don't internalize the problem. And that helps me a lot. For example, as an imaging guided surgeon, when I first started out, I'm like, I'm the Harvard guy. I want everything done, right. No bullshit. I do my job. You do your job. And I was a little bit annoying. Okay. And there were people who didn't like me at some of the places where I operated. And I know I was a little bit pushy and bossy. And what I learned to do was try to make sure everything goes right for the best interest of the patient. But I didn't bug people too much. Okay. And I would just kind of like ease into everything working. And so what I knew was I got along a lot better with people when I behaved that way, and everything was better. So instead of expecting everything to be perfect and then be disappointed and upset when it's not perfect, I would expect everything to be screwed up. And when it was better than that, I was happy. And as simple as that sounds, it really improved my mood and I really got along better with people at that point. And so somebody having that philosophy is that lowers your stress level. Lowering your stress level improves your immune system function. And then of course, the vegan diet, getting lots of exercise, getting all your sleep. And I think also what helps a person is having a very strong sense of who they are and what they want to accomplish. Because I always knew that was a big advantage for me. For example, when I was in school, my goal was to become a great doctor and to really learn the material. And so a lot of people, all they want to do is try to get an A in the class. And what I'm saying is if you're just saying to your brain, in a sense, subconsciously, all I want to do is get an A in this class, or I hope I do well so I can go to the next level in academics, whatever that might be, you'll have a tendency to forget everything when the semester is over. Versus if you say, someday I'm going to be a great scientist, a great doctor. It was kind of like my transformation of myself psychologically was I used to perceive myself as an athlete. I had a lot of athletic ability. And then I got injured and my career kind of went down. And I was very sad about that. I was heartbroken about that because that was my whole identity. My friends were all wrestlers. I was going to be a wrestler. I figured I'll be a national champion and then I'll be a wrestling coach and teach something at a college and that'll be a nice life. And so when all of a sudden I was injured and I was no longer that competitive for a while, I was freaked out by it. And my mother said, you know what? God doesn't want you to be a wrestler. God wants you to be a scientist or a doctor. I think you're going to be a great scientist or doctor. I was really happy. And in a sense, what I'd done, I took that energy, sadness, and frustration, and I put it into academics. The relevance being was I could easily study 12 hours in a day. And so even if somebody was like equally intelligent as me, whatever, IQ or whatever you want to call it, it was easy for me to work 12 hours, 10 hours, whatever. So that gave me a tremendous advantage in school. And so, because people say, well, gee, like I remember some student was sent to me asking for advice, and I'm telling them, put a table in your bathroom right next to the toilet. When you're doing a number 2, you read a textbook. When you're doing a number 1, you read a paperback book. Okay, you don't waste any time. In the car, you always listen to an audiobook. Audio record your own audio CDs if you need to. You're always listening to an audiobook. You keep this material dancing around in your brain. That's why Mozart was such a great composer. He was immersed in music. You immerse yourself in biology or whatever the subject is. They go, well, no one else does that. I go, no shit, that's why I'm the best, okay? You do these little additional things that make you better. You have the psychology, you're going to become the best. And what happens when you do that is, I don't know how to explain it, but you get all this energy. So I was so happy I don't just have to obsess about, not being the wrestler I wanted to be. Now I have a chance to become a great doctor or scientist that gave me all this energy. So that's how I won the Stanford Student Athlete of the Year award, first in my medical school class. And I think the reason why, I think a lot of people have higher IQ than I do, but they didn't have my intense focus and energy. And so it enables me to just work and not to be distracted. And that's important because a lot of people, young people today, I've had young people tell me, 20 somethings, well, nowadays everybody has attention deficit. I go, well, put your phone down, okay, genius. Why you sit with that phone around you all the time? And then like, well, my girlfriend, this girl I kind of like, she might send me a text. I go, well, if you act like a wimp and you're going to answer her text in 5 seconds, she's going to see how desperate you are. Stop being so pathetic. Go put it in the other room and just deal with it later. That's not the right way to conduct yourself. Anyways, for what that's worth.
That's all so on point. Thank you. I myself am of the type where I'm just all day listening to material, all day reading things. And I wonder, for you, do you feel socially fulfilled and happy?
I had a weird life. And what I mean by that is I had the greatest life when I was in high school. I was a great athlete. I had a wonderful family, had a wonderful girlfriend. Everything was about as good as it could be. I didn't know that was going to be as good as it could be. And then I got the Big Ten schools where I wanted to go were no longer interested in me because I wasn't as good of a wrestler anymore. Stanford still offered me a scholarship. So I go, I'm going to Stanford. I'll kind of like recreate myself. I'll get back up to speed as an athlete. And I didn't know anyone there. It was very lonely. And the women there are not very attractive. I never once had a girlfriend in 4 years at Stanford. Okay. I used to always having a really nice girlfriend. I stayed with my girlfriend for years and years, and I was very happy. So anyways, I was lonely. And then I went to med school at a school that was like almost in a ghetto neighborhood. So there were no parties. No one would walk across the street at night. Okay. So the point was there were no social activities. There was no email, internet in those days too. So I lost track of a lot of my high school friends. So I didn't mean this to happen, but I kind of became progressively socially isolated. And so if I could do it all over again, I would have done things a little different. Okay. I would have liked the perfect place I think to be for a doctor is in a rural state at a rural medical center. And you say, well, why do I say that? I'll tell you why. Because you can live 10 minutes away, so you don't waste all this time commuting. You get paid a lot more money, and you have a much lower cost of living, so you're much wealthier, and the schools around there are good, and your kid gets to go to college for free. So you get all this extra money, you save yourself from all these financial problems, and you're in a much more academic, close, friendly community, okay? Versus what most people do, because their families are in big cities, they live in the suburbs of a big city. Okay, then they commute these long drives and it's a pain in the butt. So anyways, I wish I stayed next to a college where they had a wrestling team and I could have kept wrestling because I liked wrestling and I was pretty good. I had to come back from my injury, but I would have been able to keep doing that and I would have been in top-notch physical shape. And also, I like hanging around with wrestlers. Wrestlers are real honest and direct. There's no BS with wrestlers, okay? So that's another screw-up that I made. I should have kept that. I did the best I could, made plenty of mistakes. The other thing was money. I just assumed, my dad was a real wealthy doctor. I just assumed I'm about twice as smart as my dad. Don't get me wrong, he's a pretty smart guy, but I'm like, it'll just take care of itself. If I was young though, I would have planned more. When do I become financially independent? Could I start my own business? I should have, been writing books at a younger age. I didn't really start cranking them out till I was older, and I don't really have time to market them, so I don't make close to nothing on them. Okay. And also my books, I think, scare people. What I mean by that is if you write a book promoting, some corporate product, they're going to promote that book. Okay. On the other hand, if you say diabetes can be cured with a diet, you think anybody who's going to want any corporate is going to promote that? No way. That's not even in the textbooks. I reviewed all the medical textbooks. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I went through all the medical textbooks because my kids are growing up now. My wife works. I don't spend that much time with her. And I sit there and I go through these books and I'm like, holy crap. This textbook is 100 years out of date, 50 years out of date, or it's completely wrong. All these doctors we talk about, like Esselstyn for coronary artery disease, he's not even in the textbook of cardiovascular physiology. And I'm not talking about the old edition. I'm talking about the recent edition just came out 2 years ago. He's not in the book. He's done the most in that entire field. And it's the same thing for diabetes. It's the same thing for autoimmune disease. It's the same thing for cancer and for a lot of other conditions. And so what I'm saying is the reality, the truth's not even in those books. I put it into my books. But nobody knows me. I'm not that well known or anything. A few people know me, but not too many. So it doesn't get sold. But it is what it is.
Nobody knows you yet. I hope that changes. I truly do. You're very prolific with your YouTube video creation. You're uploading so many all the time. Are there other avenues you ever think about using to reach out to people, or any ways you ever think about using to get your message out there more? I'm not sure. I know you going on Chef AJ was phenomenal because you just reached so many people that way.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. And sort of my attitude is I'll do the best I can to help people, to empower people. But that's what I'm good for. I'm not good at marketing. I'm not intrinsically very social. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love being around people and talking, but I'm not like a phone call guy. I'm just not. I work a lot. I'm tired. And I have the kind of mind that I'll just be thinking about a video and then I'll sit down and I'll crank it out. Okay. I just do everything's the first draft. I never do more than that. I mean, I try to make my stuff stand the test of time when I put on Chef AJ. I want those to be, as good as I can make them. But all I'm saying is I'm just doing this as a hobby, as a creative hobby. And to try to help people. I feel sorry for people because the reality is people don't age well. I've had an internal medicine doctor tell me most of her patients over the age of 60, they're all cognitively impaired. And I can tell you, that's been my experience of talking to people over 60. They're really, because most of them are hypertensive, diabetic. They're really mentally slow. They're just sort of pathetic. And there's zero chance of them ever getting better. They're taking all these pills. They don't know what to do. They've got the dwindles. And it's become weird, but in my opinion of American culture, it's almost like cool to be stupid. It's cool not to read. What I mean by that in comparison, if you look at the 1800s, let's say in Victorian England, everybody was reading these triple-decker novels. Charles Dickens, Victor Hugo, Fyodor Dostoevsky, they're reading 500 to 800, 1,000-page novels routinely, okay? And nowadays, you can't get a person to read a 20-page article. And so because of that, it's impossible for these people to get better. If a person continues to only take pills and not optimize their diet, their sleep, and all these other things like we talk about, their exercise, they don't get better. They just progressively decline till they're demented, and they more rapidly spiral into death. And I just see that every day, all day long. It's sad. So I feel like I give people a chance on my internet stuff, and I know I understand these things. I actually think I'm a better writer than I am a video speaker and all that. But for what that's worth, and I think the thing that's a little unique about how I approach things are, a lot of stuff is always made tailored to like stupid people, really slow and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, you know what? My attitude is if anybody wants to see me or hear me, they want to hear whatever's the best I could tell them. So I pretty much just tell them to it straight like it is. And I'll put a little complexity in there. Maybe that might be too much for them for a while, but they can always come back to it or just listen through it. And then they'll get to more stuff that's more straightforward. What I'm trying to say is I don't dumb it down, because I feel like that's the benefit of hearing me talk, is that I tell you the truth and I tell you it as clear as I can. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't play games with stuff saying, oh, well, too much information. No, if you want it, here it is, take it or leave it. It's kind of how I look at it.
That is fabulous. That's exactly why we love your channel so much. It's just a breath of fresh air. You give us all those details. I know personally from speaking to people I've shown your work, there are many people who would love to just volunteer, just help you with anything, absolutely, just to help you produce stuff, whatever. If you're ever interested, we're just all in love with what you do.
I would love maybe to do telehealth, but I don't see any money in it because I got to pay my bills. I got a kid in college. I got to pay some bills. So that's why I continue to work in conventional medicine. And the conventional medicine that I do is largely, if you will, amoral, in the sense that I primarily work as a neuroradiologist. So I read tons of brain MRIs, and I enjoy that. I like talking to my doctor friends about the brain MRIs. We get an interesting case. We say, why is this person demented? I think it's this. I think it's this. I think it's this. What do you think's going on here? So that's fun. Okay, but it's a lot of work. And, I would love to do this telehealth and be coaching people, because you think about it, if you help a person straighten out their life, let's say, anywhere from 20 to 50 years of age, you could give them 20, 30, 40 years of good, healthy life to make a tremendous difference. But I don't have the business skills. I don't have marketing skills. My social skills are good enough, but they're not great. So I don't see any avenue into that. Down the road, I'd maybe like to do something with that, but I don't know. That's where that's at.
I'll talk to my friends. Some of them are running their own practices online very successfully, and they're big fans of you. It's just my selfish interest in having you continue to work on these problems and do something that nobody else is doing. You're obviously a top neuroradiologist, but there are so many neuroradiologists doing similar things on the day-to-day, but there's nobody like you doing what you're doing for the nutrition and wellness world. Speaking the no BS way that you do, that is something which is just completely unparalleled and unique. You remind me a lot of Dr. Michael Greger, who is also intensely in the literature. The thing is, though, he has a team. He has a team for his website, helping produce his videos, putting him out on the social world, and that's how he's grown so big and his influence is so vast. Gosh, if you had that scale of health, because your messages are just unlike anything I've read in all of the previous years I've been following this world. Thank you
Yeah,
really for
well,
all you
thanks.
do.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was a bit of an advantage for me in the sense that I'm not selling anything, I'm not promoting anything. And I sort of had this unique background as having been an imaging guided surgeon. I know all the anatomy. I know all the imaging. I look at it every day. I look at how these patients age. I see what happens to their spines, their hearts, their brains. And I every month I review everything in all the demented brains and a lot of other neurological stuff. And I say, why is this person demented? And I've seen all kinds of patterns, like all these women becoming demented from hysterectomies. Most people don't know about that. If a woman gets hysterectomy before 35 years of age, she stops menstruating. So she loses that therapeutic phlebotomy equivalent effect. It means that her hematocrit goes up. Her blood gets thicker. That means her blood pressure goes up. Then she gets all the high blood pressure damage to her brain and other organs, but she's not aware of it. A guy's a little more aware of these things because he knows his other buddies are becoming impotent, having coronary artery disease, etc. Versus a woman, none of her premenopausal girlfriends has a problem with these things, but all of a sudden she has the same risks as a man, and they end up, I've seen tons of women with this extensive numerous strokes and dementia in their 50s, early 60s from getting a young hysterectomy, okay? And it was due to fibroids. They had excessive estrogen exposures. I think it's probably from tap water and from their diet. So they get these young age hysterectomies in their 20s, early 30s, and they end up demented. Things like that were kind of interesting that I uncovered for studying these books. I also, I figured out a theory of dementia. My theory is the best. The two best theories of dementia are the dilatory theory and my theory, the Rogers theory. They go together. And that's useful because the Alzheimer's is bogus. It's BS. There's a perfect example of BS. Look at Alzheimer's. What's the historical finding that tells you the patient has Alzheimer's? There is none. What's the physical exam finding that tells you a patient has Alzheimer's? There is none. What's the laboratory test that tells you a patient that has Alzheimer's? There is none. What's the imaging test that tells you the patient has Alzheimer's? There's none that's reliable. I know there's some, but none of them are reliable. Believe me, I look at brain MRIs all the time for these so-called potential Alzheimer's patients. Okay, well, what about the autopsy finding? Guess what? They can't tell at autopsy if a patient has Alzheimer's or not. So let me see. If you can't diagnose it and then you have no treatment for it, does it really exist? It's BS. Okay, what do they typically say? Oh, I think you got Alzheimer's. Take this pill, Aricept or something. It doesn't even work. They go, we'll give it a try. That's nonsense, okay? On the other hand, there's a dilatory theory of chronic cerebral hypoperfusion. There's my theory of neurovascular uncoupling. And there's a lot you can do to minimize your risk. So, and it's easy to do. So,
yeah, thank you so much for answering these questions, going in detail that you do. For those watching, go to his YouTube channel. His videos go over things like his theory of how dementia occurs, and he shows you the slides and the diagrams. He walks you through it. He is surpassing what most professors would ever show you. Depending on how this went, we may do future interviews, Q&As, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts were on this interview. Thank you, Dr. Peter Rogers, for your time and attention and for saving lives by spreading information.
well, thank you. My pleasure. It was real nice chatting with you.